Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society for the aid and attendance to this collaborative night, especially present and culturally inspired. And I'd like the Registrar Dr. Michelli to read the minutes of the last part of this.
Good evening, everyone. Great to see so many people back in chamber for yet another field debate this term. Thank you all very much for coming. I believe you have another full house. What I want to do briefly, as always in these private business meetings, is just to inform you of what it is we have done this week and what we will be doing. So first of all, I bought a pen for society. I got a fountain pen. Not helping with the image, but I think it's the first contribution I've actually made to this society. So that's very exciting news. Then to recap, so on Tuesday, the Lids had their first ever chamber debate here in chamber. It was an enormous success, debating whether or not we should reclaim the word slut. Very great attendance at that event, and hopefully we'll have another one next term. We had our school debate competition here as well. Big thank you to everyone who volunteered. It makes a big difference for all these kids to come and to get exposure to debating. So thanks to everyone who made that happen. And then I suppose next week we have our maidens final. So we had a wild card today, so that's it now with the maidens with the very last stage. The wild card final is on next Thursday. The motion is that this House believes that this is as good as it gets. So that's what we'll be debating. Please do come along. It will be the last term of debate, chamber debate this term, so do come along. If you're interested in competitive debating on Tuesdays from 5 to 7, we have novice training lasting this term. And then from 7 to 9, we've got our advanced training, and I'm pretty sure that's all the business. So there we go for this evening training.
Any objections to me signing these minutes with the true and accurate record? There being none, I shall do the sign. Mr. Treasurer, are there any comments?
There are no comments.
The Secretary, there are reports to be read.
There are no reports to be read.
Time for questions now. The Secretary, are there motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
Are there any motions not on notice?
There are no motions not on notice.
The time for questions is now closed.
This moves us on to the general business of the society. Are there any motions to be raised for general business?
I would raise a motion to call on President Jack Campbell to vacate the chair and replace the President of the I second this motion.
Given that this motion has been seconded, I will vacate the chair.
Wildcard was today. Thanks everyone who showed up. I'm happy to announce our runner-up and then our finalist. So we can't do that. Drum roll go. So our runner-up is John Graham. And our finalist is Jenna O'Leary. Next week, it's the last chamber debate term. The motion is this House believes that this is as good as it gets. So please come, it's going to be a fun time. These guys work really hard to get to where they got, and it'd be great if people showed up to support them. So thanks everyone.
Shall retire and become speakers for tonight's debate. Small talk.
business meeting, which took place, of course, last Thursday at 7:30 here in the G&B, in coordination with the Alumni Office, which was an inaugural event. There were not one, not two, but three motions on notice for a change. And then the motion before the House, this House believes that AI will bring about the downfall of humanity. So, perhaps not our best work, if anyone was there. Wasn't our most, we apologise. Wasn't much of an entertaining debate. Hopefully, we'll get some fighting tonight. But it wasn't our best work. But Kitty did a great job. It was her first time speaking in chamber. She opened the case for the proposition, and she talked all about the role of sexism in AI. Then we had two speakers, Dr. Joanne Kenny, who flew in all the way from London, and Professor Rahane. And as you know, it's my job. I don't always, execute the roles in my office, but it's my job to try and be funny. It's my job to try and make these minutes funny, but I'm a humble registrar, not a miracle worker. And I know Cook Cranston should never blame his tools, but they spoke. Then Oisin Brown, who you might remember quite famously last time he spoke in the chamber here this year, he shaved his head in front of us all. We all watched him as he shaved his head. Well, last week we simply watched his hair grow back. But Oisin did a great job. He brought, of course, capitalism and communism into the equation, as he is wont to usually do, and he effectively said AI is not the problem, ladies and gentlemen. He told us that really it is the corporations who wield it that are the problem. That was Oisin. And Cathal Eustace then closed the case for the proposition, as always, a fantastic job from Cathal. He said he was a terrible friend, and that's how he started his speech. Cathal, if you're here, I don't think so. And then finally, Ed Dowling, who's not a professor, he's a partner at EY, came to talk to us, and frankly, I was horrified when he referred to a public business meeting at the University Philosophical Society. He referred to all of us and what we do in this chamber as, quote unquote, our little talk here tonight. So, I'm not going to be like what you said. Basically, the motion then was put to the House and it fell. But today we're not talking about AI, of course, we are talking about Sinn Fein. And, yes, I think it wise that I don't speak too much on this subject. It is only the second last debate, but I don't want to be fired. But basically, Sinn Fein, what do they stand for? It's time for change. That's their motto, and I think they certainly thought it was time for change this morning when both their speakers dropped out. So, fantastic stuff. At least they're individuals of principle. Certainly they stick to their guns, so thanks very much. It's never been a pleasure. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned. Thank you.
Which will be signified by a bell. Speakers from opposing sides and audience members are free to offer points of information. We encourage general audience participation during our debates. If you hear something you like, you can shout "hear, hear," and if you hear something you don't like, you can shout "shame." We prioritise respect during our debates, and as a result, if anyone has any concerns about what is said tonight, our senior member of council Max will be around at the reception all evening and is contactable via email at smc@tcdfield.com. Alternatively, I am contactable via president@literific.org. I'd also like to remind people that not everyone speaking tonight might necessarily be representing their own views. This is a debate. I'd like to introduce the teams. Ryan Gore is a first-year PE student at Queen's University Belfast, when kindly I asked him to do this yesterday. Emma Watson is a final-year law and politics student here in Trinity and a member of the Elizabethan subcommittee here, who went to school with me. I've never heard, she doesn't remember me. Martin Kenny, TD, Sinn Fein spokesperson for Transport and Communications, formerly spokesperson for Justice and Agriculture, and Dermot Hamilton, HLM, honorary a first-year law student at Ulster University and current training officer for Literific and a runner-up in the Irish Times debate competition. On the opposition bench, we have Fintan Lawler, an aerospace engineering student at Queen's University Belfast, where he is the external leader for Literific, formerly incorporation as a United Nations correspondent and now a freelance commentator, and last will Malva Barry, a PPE student, the president of the student union here at Trinity College, and Minister Pascal Donoghue, Minister of Public Expenditure and Reform, and President of the Eurogroup and former Secretary of the Bill in 1992. And I would like to welcome first proposition Ryan Gilmore to speak.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that this country is a democracy and that we have a functioning political system. But democracy means that change is a good thing, that change is inevitable when people demand it. However, in order to know what choices we have to know what roads we can choose. It means we have to be open to accepting any side of the political avenue based on when it will suit us. But for too long in this country, we've had blinkers placed over our eyes. We've been told that there's only one path and that a political elite can tell us what we should be doing. We've been blinded by over 100 years of statehood in which change was slow and painful and brought around by citizen action rather than political change. But now we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to take another path and embrace a new vision for Ireland. It may not be a perfect vision, but we do have to try because what we have right now is not perfect. It is floundering and it is shameful. I believe that the people and the success of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil governments within this coalition, within the months past, have served predominantly in very good faith. They've been good public servants. And I'm proud to have been majority raised in a political system like that, where it's transparent, where we understand what our governments are doing. However, change, like I said, is inevitable. There are unsolved issues within the system, within our society, that are no longer serving the needs of the people of Ireland, north and south. It's time to embrace a new vision for Ireland. It's time for this House to embrace a new vision for Ireland. And it's time for this House and the people of Ireland to elect a Sinn Fein government. Because regardless of what the distinguished members of the opposition here on this bench will say tonight about their policies and the opportunities they're providing for us, we're all living on the same bloody island. We can see the state of the place. We can see our inner cities, we can see the suburbs, we can see our rural towns and our rural communities falling into a shameful state. We can look in our schools and we can look in our hospitals and it's not okay. I've said already that I think the members of this government, of the coalition, have served in good faith. But their constant presence in office over the past decades has only highlighted their inability to fix the fundamental cracks in our political society. That's why it's time for us to clap our hands, say thank you very much, and get this perpetual governance of failings off the stage and bring on the next act. Like Macbeth said, in a tragic downfall, life is but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. I want to hear no more of this government. Day in and day out, despite respecting the people of this government, I'm becoming more and more ashamed by the current coalition parties. I said I was proud to live in a nation that has a political system that meets our needs, that's transparent. But there is division being brought into our politics. Let's look at the United States, let's look at the UK, Jesus Christ, I'm living there. Let's look across Europe. It's divisive politics, it's hurtful, it's designed to cause pain. Cambridge Dictionary, unfortunately it's not Trinity English Dictionary, so unfortunately. Yesterday evening they announced their word of the year. It's hallucination. That is what members of the FFG government want you to do, or else they're convincing themselves that they are re-electable. They want you to believe that they are serving your needs, and they very clearly are. They are hallucinating. There is a lasting legacy being left by this government, and it can be summed up in a short story which has been left with me. One of my closest friends in secondary school very unfortunately had their house burned down in a tragic fire, and him, his mother, and 3 other siblings under the age of 10 were left homeless in this country for 18 months. When I say homeless, they were put in emergency accommodation for 18 months in a 3-star hotel in rural Ireland, 2 rooms between them. The shower broke midway through and was never fixed. He was coming to school every morning and having to use the showers in the changing rooms. The government didn't care. What happened was they were told, oh, you're going to get a council house next week. You're going to be put in this lovely estate. It kept getting put off. Do you want to know why? There was black mold behind the cupboards and nobody got down on their knees to clean it. We have an economy which is serving the corporate rather than the citizenry. We are abandoning our citizens. We're becoming reliant on charities to serve our needs. That's not okay. We have a massive income surplus in this country going to the government, taking our taxes, and they're spending it on God knows what because it's not serving us. We have vulture funds coming in, and this government will accept any check. They will sell away our souls. There's an irony tonight that there's a minister in the current government sitting on the opposition bench, and I really hope that's where you are after the next general election. I mean everyone who can't be considered part of this new established political elite. And I'm only calling it a political elite because now there's a viable alternative. We can choose change. We can elect a Sinn Fein government to know what other options we have. We don't have to keep electing the same chimera of 3 or 4 parties that come together just to keep Sinn Fein out of power for whatever weird reasons they'll try to sell us. We've got a third wheel in this government. It's the Green Party, but we've got Eamon Ryan asleep at the handlebars. This government is lacking innovation and ingenuity or any form of political intelligence, and it's why they will be voted out of office, because I have faith in the people of this House and in the people of Ireland to do so. I have faith that we will realise that we should prefer a Sinn Féin government and that we will. The only thing that might be able to save this current government is a David Cameron guest appearance. Take your job. We have a system of checks and balances. That's why our elections are so important. We have a Sinn Féin party who are holding you accountable. They're doing a great job in opposition. But unfortunately, you're not addressing that. What you are addressing is blank checks written to weird people in foreign countries and outstanding balances, not the checks and balances we deserve. To quote Taylor Swift, we wait for trains that just aren't coming. The public transport is a joke. The schools are a joke. The hospitals are a joke. We have a health service executive that can be hacked by any child with a laptop. Democracy means we have to embrace change, and embracing change means we actually have to go through with it. It's not enough to say, oh, look, they're doing good in the polls. Yes, maybe I'd vote for a Sinn Féin government and keep electing the same people into office. And they shuffle themselves around in this weird merry-go-round of failings. It's not working. Stop letting them put the blindfold over us. Stop letting them tell us that we have to vote for them or else our economy will cripple to the ground. Yes, we have a great economy. It's not serving the people of Ireland. We're talking about a sovereign wealth fund. Does that mean you're going to buy out Shamrock Rovers? We've been blinded. We've been lied to. And it's a good-faith government, but people aren't perfect. It's the human condition. And it means that when your time has come, when you've had your chance and you've failed at it, you've had 100 years, you've had decades and decades, it's time to step off the stage. It's time to say, yes, let's elect a Sinn Féin government. Goodbye. Please get out of government. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, Philosophical Society, Madam President of the Literific, are you enjoying sitting up in that big chair? Honourable President of both Society, members, students of Trinity College Dublin, and students of Queen's University Belfast. It is indeed wonderful to be back. It was now an annual tradition of me dressing silly and making fun of the shinners in front of prominent Irish politicians. Initially, I believe it is necessary to discuss which Sinn Féin we are indeed talking about. As despite all having the one logo presenting themselves in the same form of family allegiance, Sinn Féin, like the evil crime gang Spectre from Ian Simon's Bond, is a bit like an octopus. It may have one head, but it seems to have many tentacles, slithering and seething independently of one another. And let's indeed examine that. Let's take up north. There are somewhat nice conservative party of 7 unemployed people we call MPs. Indeed, down south, there are nice wishy-washy socialist party run by Charlie Coffey. Sorry, Mary McDonald. Up and down in the country, they are the worst sort of NIMBYs known to walk the earth. Yes.
So you talk about Sinn Féin being in peace, and yet your party leader, Neil Bradford, objected to 20 houses in Castleknock. Colin Brophy TD in 2019 objected to 500 million land, and John Letter also objected to 140 to 189 in one's time to be member of the fall. Who's the real NIMBYs around here? Is it Sinn Féin or is it the bloody on?
Well, I might consider the fact that multiple public private parties that the Sinn Féin party has continually shot down. There's around 4,000 houses that could be built within the past 5 years. that could indeed be built, but however, the NIMBYs in the Sinn Fein party seem to think, no, let's not build it. Perhaps, instead of discussing various structural and cultural issues of Sinn Fein, which there are many, rather let's explain how letting Sinn Fein into government would be a disaster. I'm not going to pretend that Fianna Gael or Fianna Fáil have clean sheets. I will freely admit to the various mistakes that they have made throughout successive governments, but equally I will admit to the various successes made in those self-same governments. I actually want to focus on how that stands to lose, in providing an informed view as opposed to speech based purely on rhetoric, as we've seen before. As you've likely heard from our proposition. Shame. Well, wonderful. Well, indeed, perhaps then a logical argument would be wise. Most of what has been said relates to housing policy. And I must ask you on the proposition if they've read the writing of Owen O'Brien. Given that he was here, I thought we would have an expert. However, he's decided to disappear. Same with Jonathan Lucan. I recommend that if you are intended running government, I suggest they hold on to their appointments. So further to that, I must ask, have you ever heard of the concept of public-private partnership? The writing of Owen O'Brien seems to discuss, and luckily they all come to the same conclusion that more houses are required. However, we cannot talk these houses into existence. You're saying there will be more such houses. Well, then we consider the fact that people actually want to own their homes. There's various issues. And also, the multiple times that we offer social housing, wherever it may be, is continually shot down. And further to that, it reflects back then on the council voting rights. If we want to build more houses in Dublin City, we have to get them voted through. However, there seems to be continual things going here. There's something in Fine Gael, therefore we cannot vote for any of their propositions at all. So to put it to their proposition, they indeed have nothing to offer but sound bites and a few pages. You haven't put in any hard work. Shouting is not a policy.
Fine Gael have been playing the hard work alongside the ball for about 100 years. It's not really working. How are you going to fix the 3,431 children that are currently homeless? You've had a chance to work.
Well, indeed there is, frankly, astonishing large amount of children. However, we also need to consider, on the whole, the entire. We need to continue. But we're still moving there. We need to consider the whole picture. We are trying to build houses. That is indeed what is happening. With the housing plan that has come through, we've had Minister O'Brien indeed walking around, despite indeed somewhat of a dubious record so far. He's indeed trying to make it better. Simply shouting and opposing, be productive, take part in the system, don't just shout. I doubt that you've ever heard of the Tala doctrine. You have to put the state before the party. It's nigh on treasonous to come around and say, well, please let me continue. You can't just sit around and argue against it. You indeed, in opposition, should complain about as productive as your House of Commons voting record. They seem to be oblivious to many things that Irish people hold essential. Whether that's about indeed owning one's home, or indeed having or the confidence comes from Ireland's place in the world stage. Have they considered the impact that will come when Mark McCarthy receives a sealed state from the President? How the relationships will change between us and the US, between Ireland and the UK, and actually that probably might be the one that we need to look at most closely here. You cannot have, in this case, a parliament in the UK where you have an elected representative, you're going to sit back and say nothing, whilst also, even though you have the opportunity to take part in their affairs, and yet you have an ambassador or indeed a minister coming to speak to them, was in a separate country. It just kind of falls apart. The logic of it just doesn't sit. So I affirm to you, no. I affirm to you that I have many times more that I will leave this island if Sinn Fein enters government. I refuse to be complicit or governed by a party that doesn't know who we are or behaves like a fourth-faced beast. There are industries in which disruption is a good thing, tearing away needed bureaucracy and making systems more transparent. The state, as outlined in the Government of Inherit and the Act of the Oireachtas, has a defined purview. It is not to be broken apart with fear further on the starting. There are simply too many balls to juggle. The current rhetoric the deputy owner the current rhetoric that our deputy displays is actually dangerous climate change by substantial detail is, again, I've actually done practice. It is indeed dangerous to suggest that we're going to let in the government. First of all, they can't hold on to their own appointments and seem to turn around that change is required, but change doesn't necessarily mean turning up when you said it. It is seemingly unbelievable, it's seemingly to me why we would vote for a party. Whilst they SDU saying that they're going to bring change, change needs to be just that, change. Allow it to be spoken about, instead of, I need to remind you that we start to behave a bit like Richard White Barrett, just saying no, 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 or indeed like the great Margaret Thatcher. Nor dear Roger. So I recommend you stop drinking Kool-Aid of champagne socialism. See what the mood is like. Come to an informed opinion, engage to make Ireland, Europe and the world a better place. Thank you.
Sinn Fein are we dealing with, whether it's the two-headed monster sort of scenario. Obviously, you'll never see people discuss the issue of Sinn Fein in government without the idea of their history or who are they and their ties throughout the Troubles. But I would say again, you need to really focus on the history of this and keep the nuance in perspective. So, obviously, with having the Troubles being so disproportionately affecting working class areas, I would say it's important to note the fact that Sinn Fein were very much grassroots in Belfast and on the ground with these particular communities. So where I would say we're missing a lot of the point is by saying they have this sinister history and we need to be really suspicious of having them in government. But I think we're not taking account of the fact that nationalists at this time, especially working class nationalists, didn't have that avenue to join in the political sphere. We had the SDLP, it's very much more kind of middle class, more highly educated background. Target audience. There's nothing wrong with the fact that that's the way. They have a lot of laudable history, the SDLP, but you can see why, with a lot of them being sort of university educated figures, it wasn't exactly the avenue for the working class people in Belfast who were nationalists and didn't have that avenue to go down. So I think when we're discussing Sinn Féin's history and the sinister aspect, I think, yes, there's seriously a lot of issues that went on up north, but we need to also involve the fact that they did provide and they did also provide an avenue for more political participation. Obviously, nobody supports violence, nobody wants that, and so it's good that we had this avenue for working class people to join in politics instead of being out on the streets. So, aside from the historical context, I would say we definitely do that we definitely need to address the current day situation, which is the issues that we're having with the government in the south. So if the question is whether I would prefer a Sinn Féin government to the current government that we have, the answer to that would be absolutely. So we've said all these things about how Sinn Féin would affect the way that the government is perceived on the world stage, like how would Ireland look. I do think that the current government we have spends a lot of time patting itself on the back for the way that it looks great for GDP and world rankings and things like that. But this kind of wealth just comes from obscenely low corporation tax. It's very much concentrated around the Dublin Docklands area, and it's not translating into tangible everyday wealth for everyday people. Just one sec. So what I'm saying is that the wealth gap has actually never been wider, and that's proven by the ESRI survey that's been on this. We've never had a bigger gap between high income and low income within Ireland. So to say that we're doing so well economically and the government's done so well for us, I think that's very non-nuanced opinion because this wealth is not translating tangibly. So I would say that at best the current government has become sort of complacent with their position and there's no desire for them to change things. But I would say at worst they've actually become beneficiaries of the status quo that we have. So I would say that with the amount, you just have to look at how many Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil TDs are also desire, no push for them to want to change the status quo and the situation that we have with the housing crisis, because they're directly benefiting from the way things are. Just a second. So what I'm saying with this is that having a new party in government, such as Sinn Fein, they obviously have this desire to prove themselves to a new demographic. Like, having them be in the government for the first time, this is the kind of motivation I feel we need behind the government. I don't think the complacency can continue any longer. And this is not to say that I'm mad about Sinn Fein and that I am a big Sinn Fein supporter. I'm just saying that if we're looking for something new and for some more motivation, what we need is a new government in place. Do you want to hear?
Yes, we go back on the you've spoken this change, something is long enough saying regarding actually inequality. Indeed, there is a gap. However, on the whole, we go from around 38 in terms of wealth inequality, 30. The tax system doesn't need work to redistribute that wealth.
Yeah, the tax system does seriously need work with redistributing wealth, but what I'm saying is, if we want to take the argument, what is it?
The point is that we improve our ranking immensely on the tax system. Now, the wealth is indeed distributed.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but what I'm saying is that this looks really good on paper, like you're saying, oh, tax is great for what you're making a point of here. But what I'm saying is, with all this wealth, this new wealth that's coming in, where are we seeing this on the ground with everyday people? Why are poor people getting more poor if this redistribution is working as well as you're saying? You know, if we're saying that we're getting such good investment into the country and we're doing so well economically, why is this wealth all concentrated around the docks and making these areas, if you're seeing so much investment in there, what are we seeing in working class areas or areas that are deprived? You know, there's nothing going into that in Dublin. I mean, you only have to look around the city centre. Where is the investment in these areas north of the Liffey? We're seeing it all around the docks, but where is it tangibly? But aside from that, if we're going to talk about all these economic issues, we could go on all day, but what I would also say it makes more sense for is the constitutional direction that the country is going in. So I think it's fair to note that Sinn Féin won the majority in the last election, both in the north and the south. They won in the south by a popular vote by 51,000, over 51,000, and in the north by over 66,000. So then having a majority in the north and the south seems to indicate that there is some sort of desire towards a bit of a change going on. But aside from that, with the opinion polls towards United Ireland leading increasingly more, indicating that we have a desire to have that discussion, it seems to make more sense to prepare for this. There's obviously a lot of anxiety in the north and the south about how would this work logistically. So what I think is, if we really want to make meaningful planning on this, the best thing we can do is have the same government in place in both the north and the south. So this would make a lot of sense through coordination of resources and services, but it would also allow us to ease the fears of people that they have regarding how would this actually play out and build confidence in the idea. So I don't think there's any point in kicking the can down the road or like staving off what we feel is probably going to happen in our lifetimes. So we need to involve citizens north and south in this debate, and the best way I feel to do that would be to have a Sinn Féin government. So just to tie everything together, what I would say is the status quo is currently not working, and I welcome any shift away from it, and I feel this is an effective way we can have that. So,
I'd like to thank my class leader for their kind words and welcome Mark Devon for a second opposition.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to Emma for that very thoughtful contribution. Thanks also to Vincent and Ryan, and I'm waiting for the points of order. It's a very long bus ride, and you should be able to think back. As Alana, who invited me here tonight, knows, I did actually hesitate about saying yes. That's not because I didn't want to visit Trinity College, but having spent a journalistic career at the BBC, sitting on the editorial fence, it's rather hard for me to adapt my style to the more adversarial traditions of student debating society. As a former BBC staff member, I am now no longer necessarily bound by the corporation's impartiality rules, but the habits of a lifetime remain hard to shake off. So I want to make it clear at the outset that if you think this is the moment I've decided to come out and declare myself as a partisan of Fine Gael, Fine Gael, or DUP, then you will be disappointed. When it comes to party politics, I define myself as a Groucho Marxist. I won't belong to any club which will have me as a member. Alana was keen, however, that I should inject
to oblige. Coming to your proposition that this House prefers a Sinn Fein government, I intend to advocate that you join me in neutrality rather than expressing a positive preference. My arguments might be familiar to any students of Scottish law here, namely that your verdict should be not proven. My case is that whilst there's plenty of excitement and curiosity attached to the prospect of Mary Lou McDonald at a t-shirt, well, we all know what curiosity did to the cat. When it comes to hard evidence, the record of Sinn Fein government in the North remains mixed. So if you do decide to give them a try here in the South, you should be aware that you will be crash test dummy strapped inside a car which hasn't yet been fully road tested. Yeah.
Robert strapped inside the car that has a vast density.
The MOT may be coming out of date, but there's no perfect options in this life. First, let's acknowledge that the story of Jerry Adams and Martin McGuinness's Sinn Fein has been remarkable. 41 years ago this month, a short distance away at Matching Hall, they took their decision to drop their previous policy of abstaining from taking their seats at the door. Now they are poised to become the biggest party in the door, potentially the Lead Party in a new governing coalition. The party is linked to the Provisional IRA, which was absolutely explicit when that Matching Hall meeting took place, has evolved over the years, which have witnessed the 1994 ceasefire, the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, and the subsequent formation of the Stormont Power Sharing Executive. Sinn Féin's Troubles legacy may still stick in the craw for some voters, but there's no doubt the evolution of the party and the peace process it spawned changed this island for the better, almost certainly saving many hundreds of lives over the last quarter of a century. As an observer of local politics, I have to admit that I am myself curious to see what Sinn Féin government here might look like. Can they deliver on their promises for radically improving provision of housing without compromising the economic advances we made? What difference will they make to the development of debate around border poll? Will we see not just a citizens' assembly, but also the creation of a new ministry for unification? Certainly for a freelance commentator, Mary Lou taking up office in government buildings holds out the prospect a much more enticing copy than the same old Tweedledum Tweedledee Act filling out in the forum. Go for it. Have you got more, by the way? Do you want I take the phrase, this house, to refer not to me and my journalistic preferences, but to you, the young electorate of the country, many of whom, if the polls are to be believed, have already decided to give Sinn Féin a go. With your futures on the line, what is your wisest course of action? With that in mind, you should at least know that when it comes to housing, the waiting list for social housing in Northern Ireland currently stands at 45,000, a figure which, according to the Belfast Telegraph, is double what it was 20 years ago. When it comes to health, 696,000 people in Northern Ireland are sitting on waiting lists for some form of inpatient or outpatient care, easily the worst waiting times anywhere in the UK. When it comes to the recent flooding, the house owners and shopkeepers in my local market town of Downpatrick complain that the compensation on offer doesn't compare at all to the more generous amounts on offer here. No, thanks. When it comes to our overall finances, whilst here in Dublin, Pascal, at the end of the table, is setting back creating a sovereign wealth fund with tax windfalls, which he and other ministers have received from multinational companies. Our most senior official at Stormont has just been briefing that we are heading for a £450 million overspend. And of course, that gloomy financial briefing was given by an official because we don't have a finance minister or indeed any other minister right now due to the complete collapse of our power sharing executive. Yep.
I think that kind of because the government is starting different political systems in the 1 year. So taking Sinn Féin, and I heard it was a most high-point executive, can really be applied to anything.
Have you read the next paragraph of my speech? Is this initially failure the sole responsibility of Sinn Féin? Absolutely not. It's a mandatory power sharing coalition. Sinn Féin's ability to resolve the many social and economic problems experienced by people north of the border is constrained by their partners, and clearly in recent times the spirit to make any kind of coalition work there have been sorely lacking. Moreover, unlike the situation here, where you can raise taxes, borrow, and spend as you see fit, Stormont is more or less a glorified local council, depending on the product cash the UK Treasury sees fit to allocate. And after this trusted budget, that finance pot hasn't exactly been overflowing. So if you ask, why didn't Deirdre Clark sort out housing once and for all, to borrow one of Mary Luther's phrases, when she was the Stormont Communities Minister, or why didn't Michelle O'Neill overhaul our hospitals when she was Health Minister, then Sinn Fein can quite rightly reply that things were very difficult. Resources were tight, they had to tic-tac with their coalition partners and so on. Fair enough. But if you were applying for a job, it's reasonable for those on the interview panel to look at your CV, and that Stormont CV is very mixed. On the upside, Sinn Fein did protect Northern Ireland welfare claimants in some of the hardest benefit cuts introduced elsewhere in the UK. They secured Irish language legislation. Martin McGuinness took considerable personal risks in denouncing dissident Republican violence. But when it comes to housing and health, the key issues here, the record's far more patchy. Last year, in the North, Sinn Fein advocated not a rent freeze, but actually a 10% rent cut. They advocated that, backing a proposal from People Before Profit. They advocated it for 12 days until their minister told them that they got it completely and horribly wrong, and having voted for that legal change for a 10% rate cut, they actually voted through one which turned it completely around and made sure that it couldn't happen. So they had a 12-day policy on housing. In 2016, Health Minister, then, Michelle O'Neill, warmly endorsed a report from an internationally renowned health expert calling for radical reform to Northern Ireland's overcrowded hospitals. 7 years on, what's happened? None of the actions recommended by that report have been taken. Is that what Sinn Fein's got? No. We've had a pandemic, a cost of living crisis, 2 lengthy interruptions to power sharing, the first triggered by Sinn Fein, the second by the DUP. But if in 5 years' time Martin and his colleagues have to explain why that rent freeze didn't go exactly according to plan, or why your health service is still experiencing difficulties, then, just as in the North, they may very well be able to blame unexpected economic headwinds or troublesome coalition partners. Now, I noticed Emma saying that things are going well, but the money is just not filtering through, and that's entirely reasonable, that argument. But you do need to make sure, if you voted a radical new government, that it doesn't kill the goose that's been laying all your golden eggs. I was listening to Owen Bryn on Good Morning Ireland today. He's clearly an extremely impressive performer, and I think it's prime time now rather than at this debate. I can also recall, though, over the years, various Sinn Fein representatives looking forward suggesting that the banks could clear everyone's personal credit card debts. Venezuela could provide cheap oil for the North Fishing Fleet, or just earlier this year, that a brigade of Cuban doctors could resolve the mammoth surgery backlog. All these policies, ostensibly appealing on the back of an envelope, were later deemed impractical. Back in 2006, Sinn Fein advocated a substantial increase in corporation tax, which a policy which was adopted then could arguably have undermined all of the growth and job creation you enjoyed since. Now, I was going to say more about the history, about the IRA. I do want to say that I would like to see Sinn Fein change in various ways, including adopting less of a litigious attitude towards journalists, like the Irish Times Harry McGee. Sinn Fein's determination to control the message no matter what sometimes makes me fear how it might behave in power. Time for a change is always a plausible and persuasive message in politics in almost any administration. Given the polls, I feel a little like King Canute here, arguing against the ebb and flow of the tide. Indeed, as I have already made abundantly clear, from a journalistic viewpoint, Sinn Fein in power here would definitely be good for business. But with an election campaign still maybe more than a year away, for now, at any rate, and for the purposes of this debate, I urge you to stick to my Groucho Marxism. Maintain your neutrality and join me in my cautious Scottish verdict on potential Sinn Fein government not yet proven. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our speakers for their kind words and welcome Mark Kennett.
Great. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here among you this evening. The one point I'd make, first of all, is that both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are children of Sinn Fein. Both of their heroes, both Devil Éireann and Michael Collins, were
we're proud members of Sinn Fein and abstain from going into an imperialist parliament. And it's unfortunate that they have the same credentials today. Sinn Fein and government will focus on making life affordable for people. The cost of housing, including rents, are crippling charge for many people. Childcare costs and energy costs are putting families under huge pressure. The longer Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are in power, the worse things have become. Sinn Fein is committed to investing in the future. We are prioritising investment in housing, health and climate action. Sinn Fein is putting fairness at the heart of our taxation policy. In recent alternative budget proposals, our finance spokesperson Pierce Doherty set out a number of tax proposals that would reduce income tax for those individuals earning under €100,000 per annum. Our financial proposals would build affordable housing, tackle high costs of living and renting, reduce health waiting lists, respond ambiguously. I will continue my speech, thank you very much. Respond ambitiously and fairly to the climate crisis and commence planning for a united Ireland. The crisis in housing and health are the legacy of successful, failed Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael policies. Fine Gael are responsible for the past 12 budgets, and 7 of those have been supported by Fianna Fáil. Their budgets have caused more patients to suffer on trolleys and waiting lists and made housing crisis worse. The Irish people, our society and economy are suffering because of renting and home ownership have been pushed beyond the reach of so many of our young people. The housing crisis is a barrier to employers hiring workers, schools hiring teachers, hospitals hiring doctors and nurses. And many of you will know another generation of young people are either leaving Ireland or being forced to live at home with their parents into their 30s and some even into their 40s. Solving the housing crisis, building affordable homes at pace and at scale is what is required, and delivering genuinely affordable homes to buy and to rent is critical to the well-being of every generation and to the delivery of quality public services and the growth of our economy. Sinn Fein in government would make housing our #1 priority. More of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil governments will only result in more of the same disastrous outcomes for students and for workers and families. I just want to focus for a moment on housing, because housing is the biggest issue. During the past 12 years of this government, the housing crisis has gone from bad to worse, and the figures speak for themselves. Housing prices have increased by 51%. That's an extra €110,000 in the cost of the average home. Rents have increased by 121%. That's an extra almost €12,000 per annum in rents. Homelessness has increased by 236%. There are now 12,827 people in emergency accommodation, a shameful record and a legacy of this government. Child homelessness has increased by 509%, a 5-fold increase in over 10 years. There are now 3,904 children sleeping in emergency accommodation compared to 641 in 2011. That tells us that it's families that are falling into homelessness. That's the legacy of Fine Gael government. That is the progress that Pascal Donegan and his colleagues talk about. In 2019, Pascal's colleague Owen Murphy launched a new affordable housing scheme with a promise of in over 3 years they would provide 6,000 affordable homes to be delivered. 0 were delivered in 2019 and 2020. Only a handful delivered in 2021. At the end of 21, Fine Gael's coalition partner Fianna Fáil took over in the housing portfolio. They promised to deliver thousands of affordable homes to buy and rent every year. In 2022, they promised 4,100 homes. How many did they deliver? 323 affordable homes to buy and 641 to rent. This year, they promised 5,500 affordable homes. By the end of June, they had delivered 101 affordable purchase homes and 22 affordable rental homes. Yeah. The social housing targets are too low and they're still being missed. The refurbishment grants, our targets are too low and they're still being missed. By the end of September this year, only 562 refurbished homes have been delivered. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are unable to deliver social and affordable homes, and they have no ambition to do so, and they have no will to do so. More than any other reason, housing is the key reason why we need a Sinn Fein government. Sinn Fein will deliver on the most ambitious public housing building programme in the history of the state. We would double the output of social and affordable homes to 21,000 next year, and critically we would deliver them. I know what you're going to ask how. We would cut the red tape by imposed by the Department of Expenditure and Reform, which Pascal oversees. By focusing on vacant and derelict buildings and building new building technologies. By redirecting existing labour to deliver affordable homes, and by attracting new labour into construction by tackling low rates of pay and bogus subcontracting. A Sinn Fein government will stand up for renters. We would ban rent increases for 3 years and put a full month's rent back into every private renter's pocket. Introduce real tendencies of indefinite duration and ensure minimum standards are actually met for renters. And critically, Sinn Fein government would end long-term homelessness by 2030. That would allow us to dramatically reduce the numbers of families and children in emergency accommodation, the biggest shame in this country. And we would double the number of first-time tenancies to over 500. This would mean that year on year, the number of adults and children in emergency accommodation would fall and continue to fall. The only solution to Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil's failure in housing is a radical change in housing policy, and that means a shift away from relying on the private sector to deliver everything. Make no mistake, this will not happen as long as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are in government. That is why we need an election and change of government. Ireland needs a Sinn Féin Minister for Housing and a Sinn Féin housing plan. To finally resolve the escalating crisis, we will deliver tens of thousands of affordable and social homes that working people desperately need and deserve. But housing is not the only crisis we have in our country. In fact, we have a crisis right across a number of our public services. And I want to focus for a moment on the health issue. Whether it was a Fianna Fáil or a Fine Gael Minister for Health, the crisis has continued to deepen. We have hundreds of thousands of people on waiting lists and hundreds of patients on trolleys daily. We have frontline health workers under enormous pressure. We all live with the fear of needing to go to an emergency department or sitting on a waiting list. And many of you, no doubt, will have thousands battling the system for disability, mental health and addiction services. All on the watch this government which has thrown in the towel on health.
Not all of these things do need solved, I agree. But the reality of the system here is that it's going to likely be a coalition government. But we shouldn't make it something potentially more curriculum and those. So are these going to be red lights that you're going to highlight with policies, or are you going to be able to be equal?
A programme for government will have to be worked out, and we will prepare to negotiate or work out a programme for government that delivers for the people. We absolutely understand and appreciate that, but it is our intention not to need a coalition. Last month the government spent 1.3 billion.
Sorry. All I hear is a lot of screaming and wild promises. And I believe all of us here know the problems that are facing our country. But what we're not hearing is the solutions that you have to offer us.
We have set out the solutions. Our solutions is about delivering for people, about ensuring that we have a taxation system which delivers and which provides the income that people need. We want to make sure that people can afford to live in this country and not have to emigrate because they can't find anywhere to live. Last month,
could you please give the House any clear Sinn Féin policies to address the issues that you bring up? You're highlighting very clearly the issues affecting the Republic, but you're not giving concrete solutions that Sinn Féin will provide for voters.
You're here. We have given concrete solutions in our pre-budget submission every year, and I would suggest we go online and read. Last month the government left a 1.3 billion hole in the health budget. This has caused an embargo on recruitment in the HSE, and people who will be most affected by this are the most vulnerable in our society. In my own area in the Northwest, I recently had a case where a child recovering from childhood cancer went to CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and they directed that the child should be treated by the intellectual disability teams. The issue here is that only 4 of the 9 CHO areas have an intellectual disability team, and they can't be transferred between them. This is the society that this government has built, where a child who suffers due to the prioritisation of private health services over the public ones. That is why Ireland needs and deserves a Sinn Féin health minister. We have a plan to deliver the right care in the right place at the right time and to cut the cost to health care. Invest in more beds, more frontline staff, and increase the capacity in diagnostic and surgical theatre space, so that no child is left to wait in agony for spinal procedures or to change their lives, or mental health intervention to save them from a crisis, or end-of-life care for an elderly relative. We all know that Sinn Féin is an all-Ireland party, and Irish unity is a key priority for the Sinn Féin government. A unified nation of confident, compassionate passionate, talented, ingenuity, claiming our future, our rightful place among the nations of the world. A new Ireland, where the orange and green and everyone in between will be reconciled. An Ireland where there is no place for intolerance or hate of any kind. All of us who call Ireland our home must be treated the same. We are planning extensively to call this place a new home. And the Sinn Fein government will deliver a united Ireland for all, not just for the some. We have decades of government that serves the interests of the few and not the many. We deserve, and you deserve, an Ireland for all. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will continue to stumble from one crisis to another, whether it be in this house, whether it be in housing, health, climate, or childcare. We have had years of cabinet chaos, conservative, self-serving governments. Ireland now needs a new government for change, a new government without the failed Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael for the first time in 100 years is achievable. Just think of that. That would be the very best outcome of this country in the next election, and you are the ones that can make that call. That is your decision, both tonight and at the next election. For me,
Unfortunately, I could find nothing of value. From one side, Sinn Fein were speaking in political quotations. We will bring the change that this country needs. From the other side, it was like hearing Irish Time columnists talking about the boogeyman of the IRA, talking about some grave, unspecified communist danger that Sinn Fein represents. There was even one speaker, a very brave speaker indeed, who defended the government. Minister, who I know this debate is not about you and your party, but I want to say, not explicitly, but I just want to say, this government, your government, has been committing social murder. Your government deserves to be called out at every possible occasion, and the idea that you should ever be in power ever again is a ridiculous notion. However, during that debate, as during this debate as well, no one is willing to point out the obvious. Sinn Fein are not leftists, they're not socialists, they're not radicals, they are left-ish. Social democratic, pro-capitalist, populist party with a Republican socialist coating that evokes revolutionary imagery while upholding the status quo. Granted, if I could vote as an Irish citizen, I would have Sinn Fein on my ballot. It has to be pointed out that Sinn Fein have some good policies. Also, Sinn Fein have supported our Book of Cows blockade. They have introduced legislation for students. They supported the Residential Tenancies Act, which gave more rights to students. No. However, I'm afraid that we are voting for Sinn Fein because we have lost the ability to imagine a radical alternative. We've lost the ability to dream of another world. As a socialist, I have to point out that the policies of Sinn Fein are in fact not radical. They represent merely a restrained form of capitalism, a compromise between the working class and the exploiting classes. They do not pose a fundamental threat to the social order. They merely soak up popular discontent, but offer no principled leadership. They are fundamentally class collaborationists, seeking to reform rather than abolish unjust systems. For example, on housing, they merely want to change the books a little bit, but not expropriate voucher funds. They are in favor of higher or lower income taxes. In some cases, they support a 15% corporate tax rate. This is all quite standard center-left politics. Sinn Fein want to work within liberal democracy, within capitalist structures, and they will succumb to capitalism without an anti-capitalist analysis of society. We already see this. Somebody pointed out, actually you pointed out, the rent issue in Belfast. I also want to raise the issue of Sinn Fein welcoming more people, Joe Biden. No, Sinn Fein attending the coronation, Sinn Fein saying that we pose no threat to big business, flip-flopping on the Israeli ambassador, having to be pressured into supporting the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador. In fact, in Belfast, because of Sinn Féin's hesitancy of a Belfast City Council motion lost, Sinn Fein and Mary MacDonald saying that they're not excluding Fianna Fáil from possible coalition. All of this is saying we pose no threat. But it goes much deeper than this, right? Ask yourself why every party that gets into power acts the same, and every party that gets into power moves to the center and implements whatever the market wants, implements austerity or neoliberal policies. It is the nature of bourgeois parliamentary democracy. That is its nature, because capitalism has its own internal logic that you cannot go against unless you abolish it. And that's all the logic is to minimize wealth and maximize profits and maximize capital accumulation. Yet Sinn Fein does promise to be the party that will pay capitalism. And it is in this way that Sinn Fein have become charlatans. And the nature of charlatans is to deceive, and those who follow charlatans will be deceived. I ask what happens when that deceit is uncovered. Look no further than Syriza, a Greek left-ish party that in 2010 got elected on a left populist platform, much like Sinn Fein. They got into power, they sold out to capitalist power, they implemented austerity, and they lost relevance. And the far right rose because of it. Social democracy is bound for failure. And when we Marxists say that social democracy is the moderate wing of fascism, we do not mean that Sinn Fein is fascist. We mean that Sinn Fein will create the conditions in Ireland, for the rise of the far right, because they will not be able to implement a radical change. What we need is a socialist movement. Socialism is the destruction of capitalist relations of production. No. And socialism is the destruction of capitalist relations of production and of the liberal democratic representative system and its replacement by worker self-management, by economic democracy. Socialism requires a revolution, the forceful overthrow of the state. In fact, it is this month, in November 2023, that we celebrate the 106th anniversary of the October Revolution, when millions of overthrew the liberal capitalist Kerensky government and established grassroots assemblies in each taking over production and establishing for a brief period of time the world's most democratic state, producing profit. And all over the world today, people are organizing resistance to capitalism. A socialist alternative, from the Maoists in the Philippines to the Zapatistas in the Chiapas. And Rojava in Syria. We should join the struggle against capitalism and do our part in the imperial court. I don't want Sinn Fein, I want another world, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
That's an interesting one. I think there's a big difference. Well, one, this is a debate compared to a political party over the last 100 years. Which, alright. Fair enough, the IRA did exist. They did shoot quite a lot of people down lights, and to be honest, I won't stand over that. I think, it kind of fucked things up north. My apologies to Sharon. In the litter, find people bought supports of this where I'm not anymore. Fintan brought up the idea that he would leave Ireland should Sinn Fein get into the government. But over the last 100 years, during Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and Green Party and Labour governments, thousands have had to leave Ireland, rather than from his very middle class position of choosing to have had to leave Ireland or face no other option. They've had the choice to sit by in poverty, have the option to emigrate or either join the civil service, EY or die.
One information.
I think they will talk me about possibly still sponsored, so but I will actually address some of the interesting history of this government. Obviously, there was the point brought up about Sinn Fein suing journalists, to which Pascal offered a rousing here. I think he offered the same thing whenever Senator Paddy Coffey sued the Kilkenny people in 2016. Remember his party? I think he offered the same here whenever Councillor Tom McHugh did the exact same thing in 2016. And of course, who could? Any fan of Irish politics could never forget Swinggate, which really appeared, in which she fell off the swing and then didn't fall off the swing. No one can really remember. There was talks of kind of the social murder by Glasgow, and I actually will agree with them on that. Because in the first 4 months of 2023, 20 homeless people died prematurely because of the conditions laid down by this government and government's plan. 3,431 children are homeless in Ireland. 8,323 adults in temporary accommodation. 65 billion euro in a rainy day fund. By what is it, 2028, Pascal? 1 billion euro underspent in the budget under Darrell O'Brien and this government in the specific ring-fence funding for affordable and social housing. €1 billion fucking euros. That is €1 billion left behind so we can continue to leave renters behind, can leave homeless people behind, can leave those in the temporary accommodation behind. They promised 50,000, no thanks, affordable homes, and they broke 50,000 dreams. They've left student accommodation here in Dublin inaccessible, in many cases uninhabitable and unaffordable. They talk about banning sex for rent. That wouldn't be a thing without the conditions they've laid before you here in Dublin. Whenever I was little, I didn't want to go to Queen's. I didn't want to go to fucking Ulster. I wanted to become a Trinity. It was my dream to stand in these halls, to be a Trinity boy, just like Edward Carson, Oscar Wilde, and brothers. Just like Pascal Clinton. But at £1,000 a month for a fucking room in somewhere on the north side of Dublin, which is barely accessible, which is barely habitable, that's not affordable. It's not realistic. That's my dream broken here at Trinity. I'll never be able to afford it because I'm not some D4 dad. I'm not somebody with a massive trust fund. That's the reality here for people in Dublin. Irish adults will die poorer than their parents. Of course, the tax system works so beautifully here in Ireland. That's why Pascal and his party ran to Europe to stop Apple paying their fucking taxes. Healthcare here in Ireland is for the few, not the many. A Reaganomic style approach to healthcare systems where they let poor people die on trolleys in university hospitals. Of course, but here, it's not their fault. They're missing out on tax because welfare treat us all. That's Leo Bradley, not mine. Of course, I want to touch very quickly on Leo, famously an honest, hard-working politician who, secretly leaks documents to his mates and then sues fucking journalists. He who stood by and watched the healthcare system fall apart watch the exchequer fall apart. That's your Taoiseach. He's the same man that stands by even now and watches this country fall apart by the seams. Martin brought up the United Ireland. Something I've kind of been raised on, something I've dreamed of as a boy. And when I look at this part of the country, I look at a government that made up of Fine Gael, formed by fascists, a party of landlords and nettle babies. You Fianna Fáil, party of ex-IRA killers, now made up of landlords and nettle babies. And then you've the Green Party, blue shirts on bikes. You look at the legacy of stagnation, the legacy of failure, the legacy of austerity. When I look at that, I don't want any of that. Keep your 26 counties. Because you know what? At least the Tories will throw money at us when things are At least we can get away from being a post-conflict society and do the whole lot of how bad it is for us. But down here, they've just majorly fucked up. Because they offer that consistent legacy of failure here. The proposition, we try and offer you a fair deal. Sinn Fein aren't perfect, I wouldn't say they are. I think they're far fucking from it. But we offer you a fair deal. A fair deal for students, a fair deal for nurses, a fair deal for renters, a fair deal for the mica victims, a fair deal for people who are dying in direct provision, who are living in uninhabitable conditions. A hallucination offered by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and the Green Party is not good enough for the people of Ireland. It's not attractive enough to create a united Ireland. And by God, I hope you vote for the proposition, because you've not got much choice, because look at the opposition.
This really important motion. What I want to do firstly is say why you should not vote for this motion. And the most compelling reason as to why you should not vote for this motion is actually those who are proposing it. It's the argument that they put forward. Implicit in the argument that they put to you is that they can bring about change. They can change things for the better. So if you want to bring about change, I put it to you here this evening. I put it to the honourable members of the FIL, the honourable members of Queen's University Society here this evening. You need to do two things. The first thing you need to do is talk about and identify the issues that matter to all of you, that matter to Ireland, that matter to our world. The second thing you need to do is you need to offer the solutions. You need to show what you would do differently. Now, in fairness to the proponents, they did talk about some of the issues. They did touch on housing, we'll come on to that in a moment. But shame on you, no mention of climate change. Shame on you, no mention of the fact that our world is burning. You had a chance, you didn't mention it. No mention of climate change. Shame on you. No reference to a war raging in Ukraine and what that means for Ireland, what that means for Europe. Shame on you. Shame on you. No mention of the Middle East and how Ireland and Europe needs to respond back to what is happening there. Shame on you to talk about our economy, to talk about GDP, not to talk about jobs, not to talk about income, not to talk about the fact that public finances make a difference to our jobs, to our ability to fund public services. But the issues they did acknowledge, let's come on to that. Staggeringly, For a group here, for proponents that are advocating, at least I thought, and I came here tonight, a united Ireland. We heard a bare glancing mention on it from Martin, a poor joke from the final speaker. Two efforts to united Ireland. But what they are united in, is none of them tackled how they would bring about. None of them tackled the issues regarding how you would create a proposition for change, how you would talk to a minority, what that means for our relationship with Europe, what that means for our relationship with Northern Ireland. On housing, of course I know the impact the housing crisis is having on our people. Of course I know what it means for the people I represent, for you, your families. But to do that justice, you need to say what you're going to do differently. You need to say how you're going to build more homes. And this is the best we got from Deputy Kenny. He said, we will bring forward a solution that is about delivery for the people. Really? Is that the best you can offer? The best you can offer is you say you're going to cut red tape. How many other politicians have stood up and promised to you? Since when has cutting tape meant radical change? He then went on to say, we'll use new building technologies. Really? Is that a recipe for building more? Is this an idea this government has never heard of? Or have the luxury of hearing about it the first time tonight? We then heard about what we need is more apprentices. I mean, really, is that the best you can offer? So for all of you who are thinking about how you want to vote here this evening, and I hope many of you are, because I've been so impressed to see the wonderful traditions of the film so alive and well since I was last year. If you want change, why did the proponents only touch on the issues that really can make a difference to the future of our country? Why no reference to the issues that consume the world? If you want change, you need to know how it's going to happen. You need to know how it's going to be delivered. And you need to know how it will be paid for. Issues that not a single speaker touched upon, barely touching on the question of the future of this island. Barely. Not even touching on how they will bring it about. The best they can offer is cleans of allegiance. The best they can offer is that I don't care. And let me address the phrase that also used in his address when he used the phrase murder. Well, my friends, in an age in which we can see what polarisation really can cause, in an age in which we can see the costs of division, and in an age in which we can see what the loss of life really looks like, Laszlo, think carefully before you use that word. About anything. But when we talk about the claim of elitism, when we say, well, actually it's because Pastor over there, you know, such a pity the October Revolution didn't get it. It's such a pity that he just doesn't care. My friends, if you're looking for an elite, you're not going to find them in me. You're not going to find them in this member of your government, elected by you, standing in front of you here this evening. I got into this college in the same way any of you did. I worked in this college just like many of you did. And I represent a constituency in the heart of the inner city of this country. That's not being an elite. That's what all of you do. Working, do my best to make a difference to the issues that I care about. And when I hear an economy being dismissed as if it's such an abstract concept, it's something for others. You know the value of an economy when you need a job. You know the value of an economy when a country runs out of money. And for those of you who say that GDP is an abstract concept, the truth of it is it is. But a growing economy builds more homes. More than 30,000 homes built this year. A growing economy gives you the job you deserve. A growing economy can pay for the education that should be yours, that I hope is yours. That's not something that is a conspiracy. It's certainly not something that is a shimmer. It's real, and you'll know it's real when it's not around. So for those who are making case for change, well, address the issues that need change. For those who stand in front of you, creating the lure that easy change is possible, ask them how it will come about. Remember, what are the costs of simple claims spoken with certainty? What are the costs of that? Aren't we seeing those costs run amok elsewhere? And I, speaking in front of you, I'm many things, as I said in my few words earlier on. What I'm not is an elite. But what I recognise is that this is an imperfect world. What I recognise is that while this is a country that is making progress, that still has so many failings, still has so many things we need to do better on. But are we better? Are we making progress? So if I was addressing myself, if I was speaking to me when I was here 32 years ago, I would be talking about a country in which life expectancy has grown. I would be talking about a country that if you got sick in, you get better care in than was possible 30 years ago. I would be talking about a country that can bring about social progressive change. I will be talking about a country that's in Europe, that's growing in Europe. I will be talking about a country that economically, and let's be clear about this, is better off than my mum and dad inherited. I will be talking about a country in which the opportunities in front of you as a generation that I am so privileged to serve, that while the opportunities are still not what you want them to be, are better than they could be. But that's not the question. The question is, if you're voting for this motion, what is the change? How can it be brought about? You heard rhetoric, you heard claims, you heard loud voices from the opposition. You didn't hear a single solution. You didn't hear any effect as to how that change would be brought about. And on that note, on those grounds, they failed